In 1847, a minister in New York watched his dead wife walk out of the woods. She'd been buried 3 years. She smiled at him. She raised her hand. Then her face began to melt and reform into something else. He ran. He never entered those woods again. He wrote one sentence in his journal that night. It was not Sarah. It was something wearing Sarah. Something wearing Sarah. That phrase appears in Tartarian manuscripts written 200 years earlier. In Russian. 4,000 miles away. Word for word. How does a minister in Albany describe the same creature, the same behavior, in the same words as texts he never could have read? This video will probably be removed. The last 3 channels that covered this topic were deleted within months. But I'm going to show you what I found. Because these shapeshifters weren't just in Tartaria. They weren't just in 1847. They're still here. And once you know what to look for, you'll start seeing them too. The journal Ezra Whitmore was a Presbyterian minister, educated at Yale, rational, respected in his community, not prone to fantasy or superstition. His journal survives in a private collection. His great-great-great-grandson has it. I've seen photographs of the relevant pages. The entry from October 14th, 1847, is written in shaking handwriting. The letters slant downward as if his hand was trembling. I walked the forest path as I do each afternoon. The leaves were turning. The light was golden. I felt at peace. Then I saw a man between the birch trees, perhaps 50 yards distant. I raised my hand to wave, as one does to a fellow traveller. He raised his hand also, but the motion was wrong, delayed, as if he was learning how hands work, as if he had seen the gesture but never performed it. I stopped walking. I watched. His face began to change. The features softened like wax near flame, reformed, and suddenly it was not a man at all. It was Sarah, my wife who died 3 winters past. She smiled at me, the smile I knew, the smile I had loved. She opened her mouth to speak, and from inside came a sound no human throat could make, a sound like wind through hollow bones, a sound like something hungry. I ran. God forgive me, I ran. I did not look back. I did not stop until I reached the town. Something that mimics human movement imperfectly, something that wears the faces of the dead, something that makes sounds no human throat can produce. Whitmore never spoke of this publicly. He continued his ministry for another 30 years. He never entered those woods again. On his deathbed in 1879, he told his son a single instruction: burn the journal. Some knowledge damns the knower. His son didn't burn it. Neither did his grandson, or his great-grandson, or his great-great-grandson. 5 generations kept it hidden, passed it down with a warning. Don't read it, don't share it, don't speak of what's inside. Until 2019, when a researcher in Moscow translated Tartarian manuscripts that describe the exact same thing. The Tartarian texts. Let me explain what I mean by Tartaria. Until the mid-1800s, maps of the world showed a civilization called Tartaria. It covered much of northern Asia, what we now call Siberia, Mongolia, parts of China and Russia. Then it vanished from the maps. The name was erased, the history was rewritten. What remained was absorbed into Russia, China, and other nations. Most historians say Tartaria never existed as a unified civilization. They say it was just a geographic term, a European name for lands they didn't understand, but manuscripts survived. In 2019, a linguistics researcher at Moscow State University named Alexei Petrov was cataloguing old documents from a monastery archive in the Ural Mountains. He found texts in a language that wasn't quite Russian, wasn't quite Mongolian, wasn't quite anything in the standard linguistic databases. It took him 3 months to develop a partial translation key. What he translated disturbed him so deeply that he published only fragments. He refused interviews. He left the university 6 months later. But the fragments he published are enough. One describes beings called The hollow ones. They wear the faces of the dead. They learn to walk as men walk, but the learning is imperfect. They speak in stolen voices, but inside they are empty. They have no soul fire. They cast no shadow when the sun is highest. And when they forget to hold their shape, when the mask slips, their true form emerges. The form that has no name. The form that cannot be looked upon. The hollow ones. Shapeshifters who wear human faces, who mimic human movement, who use the forms of the dead to hunt the living. Described in Tartarian texts, written centuries before Ezra Whitmore walked into those woods in Albany. The same beings, the same behavior, the same impossible details. I can't prove these texts are authentic. I can't prove Petrov's translation is accurate. He won't speak to researchers anymore. But the match between his fragments and Whitmore's journal is too precise to be coincidence. Someone, or something, was being described across cultures and centuries. And then, somehow, it was erased from history. The pattern. Whitmore wasn't alone. Once I started looking, I found accounts from across the world. Different continents, different centuries, different languages. Same creature. Quebec, 1789. A French trapper named Jean-Baptiste Mercier documented an encounter in his trading journal. I saw my brother Marcel standing by the frozen stream. Marcel died of fever the winter before. I called to him. He turned. He smiled. But his face was wrong. Too smooth, like a mask of skin. He opened his mouth, and the sound that emerged was not French, not any language. I fired my musket and ran. When I returned with others, there were no tracks in the snow. None at all. California, 1802. A Spanish missionary named Father Diego Velázquez wrote to his superiors in Mexico City. The natives speak of demonios that steal the shapes of the faithful departed. They will not say the name of these beings. They believe speaking it draws attention. I dismissed this as pagan superstition until I saw one myself. It wore the face of Brother Tomas, who died of the pox 3 months prior. Pennsylvania, 1851. A German immigrant named Heinrich Braun wrote to relatives in Bavaria. There are things in these American woods that we do not have in the old country. Die Gesichtlosen, the faceless ones, who take the forms of those you have loved and lost. My neighbor Herr Hoffmann swears he spoke with his dead mother for 10 minutes before he noticed she cast no shadow. He has not been right in the mind since. India, 1867. A British officer named Captain Edward Blackwood recorded in his military journal. The locals speak of beings they call the empty men. They say these creatures can become anyone they have seen die. The villagers burn their dead specifically to prevent this. They believe an intact corpse can be copied. I thought it native nonsense until Private Williams reported seeing his deceased wife walking through camp at 0300 hours. Williams died by his own hand 3 days later. I have ordered the men not to speak of this. Appalachia, 1894. A schoolteacher named Martha Cavendish wrote in her diary, "The children speak of the mimics in the woods. They say if you see a family member in the forest, you must ask them something only that person would know. If they cannot answer, you must not follow them. You must run." A child named Samuel Perkins did not run. He followed his dead grandfather into the trees. We found his clothes by the creek. We never found Samuel. Different places, different times, different cultures. Same creature. Beings that steal the faces of the dead. Beings that mimic human movement imperfectly. Beings whose true form has no name or is too terrible to describe. The accounts span from the 1600s to the early 1900s. Hundreds of them, scattered across archives, journals, letters, and official reports. Then, after about 1910, they almost completely stop. Not because the beings disappeared, because someone decided we weren't supposed to know about them anymore. The native knowledge I need to address this carefully and respectfully. Many Native American tribes have traditions about shape-shifting beings. The most widely known is the Navajo concept of the Skinwalker. But many other tribes have similar traditions. The Mohawks speak of stone giants that can take human form, the Lakota of water spirits that mimic the drowned, the Ojibwe of beings that wear the faces of the recently dead. I'm not going to discuss specific sacred beliefs. That's not my place. These are living traditions, and they belong to the peoples who hold them. But I will say this. When European settlers arrived in North America and began documenting their encounters with shape-shifting beings, the native peoples were not surprised. They already knew. They had always known. A Lakota elder, speaking to an ethnographer in 1891, said something that has stayed with me. The white men see the face stealers now. They think these beings are new. They are older than the mountains, older than the first people. We learned long ago not to speak of them. Speaking draws their attention. Naming gives them power. The white men do not understand this. They write everything down. They speak everything aloud. They will learn. Speaking draws their attention. Naming gives them power. Multiple tribes across the continent had words for these beings, had rules for dealing with them, had warnings passed down for countless generations. The rules were remarkably consistent. Don't speak there. Name. Don't look at them directly. Don't acknowledge them. If you see a dead relative in the woods, do not follow. If they speak to you, do not answer. If they call your name, cover your ears. And above all, if you believe they have noticed you, never be alone. Because once they notice you, they don't stop. They follow. They wait. They watch. And eventually, they take what they came for. The photographs. In 2016, a collector in Romania named Andrei Florescu purchased a box of old photographs at an estate sale outside Bucharest. He paid €200 for the lot. 43 images, mostly typical 19th century photography, family portraits, landscapes, formal occasions. But 7 photographs were different. They showed what appeared to be people, but something was wrong with them. Proportions slightly off, limbs a bit too long, faces a bit too smooth, eyes that didn't quite match each other, smiles that showed too many teeth, or teeth that were the wrong shape. In one photograph, a family poses formally in a parlor. 8 people. 7 of them look at the camera, expressions neutral. The 8th figure stands at the edge of the frame. It's not looking at the camera. It's staring at a woman in the center of the group. The woman's expression is pure terror. Florescu posted the images on a Romanian paranormal forum, asking if anyone could explain what he was seeing. Within 3 days, he received over 400 messages. Dozens of people shared similar photographs from their own family collections. Images where one figure doesn't look quite right, where one face seems borrowed, where one person in the group appears to be wearing a costume of human flesh. Then something happened. Florescu's account was suspended without explanation. The thread was deleted. The images were scrubbed from the internet. He received a letter, physical mail, not email, from someone claiming to represent a historical preservation society. The letter offered to purchase the original photographs for €50,000. He refused. 3 weeks later, his apartment was burglarized. Nothing was taken except the box of photographs. Florescu still has digital scans. Low resolution, he'd photographed them with his phone before posting. But the originals are gone. When I contacted him and asked why he wouldn't discuss the photographs publicly anymore, he sent me one sentence. I started seeing them in crowds after I posted. Faces that don't move right. I can't make it stop. I don't know what that means. I'm not sure I want to know. The disappearances. This is where it gets darker. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, unexplained disappearances spiked in specific regions at specific times. The Bennington Triangle in Vermont. Between 1920 and 1950, at least 5 people vanished without a trace in a small area of wilderness. Experienced hikers, Hunters who knew the terrain. One woman disappeared from a moving bus. The Bridgewater Triangle in Massachusetts. Centuries of disappearances, strange sightings, unexplained phenomena. Native American tribes considered the area cursed long before European settlement. The Michigan Triangle, the Alaska Triangle, zones across North America where people vanish at rates that statistics cannot explain. The conventional explanations are predators, accidents, exposure, criminal activity. But the patterns don't fit. Experienced outdoorsmen vanishing on easy trails in good weather. Hunters disappearing in areas they'd walked 100 times. Children vanishing from their own backyards in broad daylight. And in case after case, the last witnesses reported something strange. He walked towards someone he seemed to recognize. She said she saw her grandmother standing by the trees. Her grandmother died in 1987. He told me his brother was calling him from the woods. His brother was killed in Vietnam. Walking toward familiar faces, following the voices of the dead. The same behavior described in the Tartarian texts, the same behavior Ezra Whitmore witnessed in 1847, the same behavior Native American traditions warned against for generations. I can't prove these disappearances are connected to the shapeshifters, but the pattern matches, the behavior matches. The locations cluster in ways that random chance doesn't explain. Something is taking people, and it's using familiar faces to do it. The suppression. Here's what bothers me most about all of this. The accounts exist, the pattern is visible, the evidence spans centuries and continents, but no institution studies it, no university investigates it, no government acknowledges it. After about 1910, the reports nearly vanish from the written record. Why? Think about what changed in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The first international copyright and information sharing agreements were established. For the first time in history, governments could coordinate what information was published across borders. The first systematic efforts to debunk superstition and folklore began. Scientific rationalism became the dominant paradigm. Anything that couldn't be explained by conventional science was dismissed, ridiculed, pathologized. Psychology emerged as a field, and with it, convenient labels for people who reported impossible things. Hysteria, delusion, psychosis. The Tartarian manuscripts were buried in monastery archives. The Native American warnings were dismissed as primitive belief. The European accounts were filed away as mass hysteria or literary invention. By 1920, an entire category of phenomenon had been erased from acceptable discourse. You could see these beings, you could experience them, but you couldn't talk about them. Not seriously, not publicly, not without being dismissed as mentally ill. The suppression was remarkably effective. 2 generations grew up not knowing, not believing, not having words for what some of them were still seeing. And the beings, they didn't go away. They just got better at not being recorded. The modern accounts. They're still being seen. I've collected over 200 accounts from the past 20 years, posted on forums, shared in private messages, whispered in corners of the internet, where people feel safe enough to speak. The accounts are remarkably consistent. Appalachia, 2015. A hiker posted anonymously, "I saw my mother standing on the trail ahead of me. My mother has been dead for 12 years. She was smiling at me, but her teeth were wrong. There were too many of them, and they were sharp. I backed away slowly, and she just watched me, smiling. I ran when I reached the bend. I haven't been back to that trail." Rural Oregon, 2018. A truck driver shared his experience. "A man flagged me down on a back road at 2 a.m. He looked exactly like my father. Exactly. Same face, same build, same flannel jacket. But my father died in 2003. I slowed down, but something told me not to stop. As I drove past, I saw him in my rearview mirror. He dropped to all fours and moved toward the tree line. Fast, faster than anything human could move. Upper Michigan, 2021. A group of campers filed a police report that was later leaked online. Something circled our campsite all night. We could hear footsteps in the leaves. In the morning, we found tracks, human footprints, but they changed size as they went around the perimeter. Started adult-sized, ended child-sized, then stopped at the edge of our camp, like it had been watching us, deciding. Scotland, 2022. A farmer posted on a UK paranormal forum. My wife and I saw her mother walking across our field at dusk. Her mother has been dead for 7 years. She was walking toward the barn. My wife called out to her. She turned around. She was smiling, but the smile was wrong, too wide, too many teeth. She didn't speak. She just looked at us. Then she walked backward into the shadows of the barn. Not turned, around and walked. Walked backward, still facing us, still smiling. Same beings, same behaviors, same wrongness. Still here, still hunting, still wearing familiar faces, just not being reported through official channels. Because official channels don't believe, don't investigate, don't want to know. What I think. Let me tell you where I've landed after months of research. I think something exists that can change its appearance. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know if it's a single type of being or many. I don't know if it's natural or something else entirely. I think it's been here for a very long time. The Tartarian texts suggest centuries at minimum. The Native American traditions suggest thousands of years, maybe longer. I think it uses the faces of the dead, because that's how it hunts. A familiar face draws victims closer. A loved one's voice makes people follow. We're wired to move toward people we recognize, people we love, people we've lost. These beings exploit that. They weaponize our grief. I think the suppression was deliberate. Someone, some institution, some organization, some group, decided in the early 20th century that we weren't supposed to know about these things. They removed the accounts from public discourse. They made the topic ridiculous. They ensured that witnesses would stay silent rather than risk being called insane. Maybe they thought they were protecting us. Maybe they were protecting something else. And I think it's still happening. People are still seeing them. People are still disappearing. People are still walking toward familiar faces in the woods. We just don't have a framework for talking about it anymore. The suppression worked. Almost. The Whitmore family. Let me end where I started. Ezra Whitmore saw something in those woods in 1847. He wrote about it. He told his family to burn the journal. They didn't. 5 generations kept the secret, kept the journal, kept the warning. His great-great-great-grandson contacted me after I started researching this topic. I'll call him David. That's not his real name. David told me his family always knew about the journal. It was kept in a locked box, passed down with strict instructions. Don't read it, don't share it, don't speak of what's inside. He broke the rule. He was curious. He read it. And then he told me something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. 3 weeks after I read the journal, he said, I saw my grandmother in my backyard, just standing there by the fence, watching the house. She died in 2011. He didn't approach her. He remembered what happened when the creature in Whitmore's account opened its mouth. He remembered the sound, like wind through hollow bones. He went inside. He locked the doors. He closed the blinds. He didn't look out the windows until morning. She was gone by then. But he's seen her twice more since. Always at a distance. Always at dusk or just before dawn. Always watching. I think reading the journal was a mistake, he told me. I think speaking about them, even thinking about them too much, makes them notice you. I think that's why my ancestor wanted it burned, not to hide the truth, to stop drawing their attention. He asked me not to use his real name, not to say where he lives, not to share any detail that might identify him, because he believes they're watching him now, and he doesn't know how to make them stop. My experience. I need to tell you something. Since I started this research, I've seen things too. A figure at the edge of my vision that disappears when I turn. A face in crowds that shouldn't be there. A face that belongs to someone who died years ago. 3 weeks ago, I was walking my dog at dusk. I saw my mother standing at the end of my street. My mother is alive. She lives 3 states away. But there she was. Same posture, same coat, same way of standing with her weight on her left leg. I didn't approach. I called my dog and walked the other direction. When I looked back, she was gone. Maybe it was someone who looked like her. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe I'm seeing patterns where there are none. But I can't shake the feeling that something has noticed me. That something is watching now. And I don't know what to do about it. The questions. What are the shape-shifting beings described across cultures and centuries? Where do they come from? What do they want? Why do they wear the faces of the dead? How do they know which faces will draw us close? Why was knowledge of them systematically suppressed? Who decided we weren't supposed to know? Are they connected to the disappearances that still happen in remote places? Are they still among us, wearing familiar faces, waiting for us to follow? How do you know if you've drawn their attention? What do you do if they've noticed you? I don't have answers. But I think these are the right questions. And maybe, it's safer not to ask them at all. Ezra Whitmore wanted the journal burned. The Tartarians wrote their warnings in dead languages. The native peoples spoke of these beings only in whispers, if at all. Maybe they understood something we've forgotten. Some doors shouldn't be opened. Some knowledge damns the knower. Some things are safer left in the dark. Something out of place. Something out of time. Something wearing a familiar face. The records were erased, but the beings remain. Don't look too long at the figure in your peripheral vision. Don't follow if a dead loved one calls your name. And if you see them watching you, don't let them know you see them too. These accounts are unverified. I present them for discussion, not as established fact. Some researchers believe that documenting these beings, speaking of them, thinking about them, drawing attention to them, is itself dangerous. I've chosen to share this information anyway. Whether that was wise, I honestly don't know. If you've seen something similar, if you've encountered a familiar face where it shouldn't be, I'd like to hear from you. But I understand if you choose to stay silent. Some things are safer left unspoken. Thanks for watching. If you're still here, if you're still you,